Hello and welcome to the HistoryNetwork.org podcast. If you'd like to become a patron of the podcast, we would love you to. And you can do so at patreon.com/the History Network. Thanks to all our patrons who make this podcast possible. A couple of quick apologies from me. One, I've not been sticking to the 2 weekly releases of late. That's due to moving house, and also circumstances mean that today I'm recording outside, so you may hear the occasional bird song, car noise, dog bark, or baby cry, or some other obscure noise that doesn't normally appear in the podcast. Anyway, I hope it doesn't interrupt your enjoyment, and the podcast is recorded with love, as always. The HistoryNetwork.org podcast, Season 37, Episode 6. I sing of Welsh arms and the man, the battles of Taliesin, Part 2. This episode was written by Murray Darm. Murray is an ancient and medieval military historian from New Zealand living in Australia. He has written more than 100 articles on various aspects of ancient and medieval military history, as well as other historical topics from all periods, ranging from the history of opera to the runic alphabet and recipients of the Victoria Cross. He is the author of Macedonian Phalangite versus Persian Warrior, Athenian Hoplite versus Spartan Hoplite, and Leuctra 371 BC, all from Osprey Publishing. He is, of course, a regular writer on here and a regular on the Ancient Warfare podcast. Another poem, Gwaith Argoed Llwyfain, refers to another campaign against the Angles of Bernicia. It also provides remarkable insights. Here, the leader of the Angles is named as Fflamddwyn, perhaps meaning flamebearer or flamboyant one. It may refer to Theodoric of Bernicia, reign circa 584 to 591, whose reign coincides with Urien's. The idea that it refers to Ida, the first king of Bernicia, reign 547 to 559, is probably too early to correspond to Urien and Owain's dates, although there is some crossover with the earliest dates of Urien's reign. The poem tells us, Saturday there was a great conflict from the sun's rising to when it went down. Fflamddwyn marched forward in 4 battalions to lay waste the lands of Godow, southern Scotland, and Reged, from Argoed to Arfinid, locations not identified, but which may mean forests and mountains respectively. The muster was summoned. We can note the muster, perhaps the calling of the fyrd in later Anglo-Saxon England, although also similar to the calling up of men in earlier armies too. Fflamddwyn demanded hostages but was refused. Opposing him were not only Urien, but also his son Owain, scourge of the Eastlands. Although the poem dwells on Urien's speech of what he intends to do rather than recount what actually happened at the battle, it speaks to his defiance at the invasion of the Angles and of the interminable back and forth warfare between the kingdoms. Urien told Fflamddwyn, "We shall raise up our ramparts higher than the mountains, and lift our faces above their ridge, and raise our weapons above our men's heads, and march on Fflamddwyn with his battalions, and cut him down and his company with him." And this seems to be what actually occurred during the battle, for Taliesin concludes, "There, before Argoed Llwyfain, an abundance of corpses, crows red with warriors' blood. As the people marched with their lord, I shall plan a whole year for my victory song." In a later poem, Lament for Owain, we discover that Owain slaughtered Fflamddwyn and then punished those who didn't flee far enough, perhaps suggesting that He took over the war leader role of his aging father, although Urien was still apparently more than capable. It is unclear if this took place in the immediate aftermath of this battle or later, after Urien's assassination. The Historia Brittonum 63 tells us that Theodoric reigned for 7 years, and in that time Theodoric fought bravely together with his sons against that Urien. But at that time sometimes the enemy and sometimes our countrymen were defeated, and he shut them up 3 days and 3 nights in the island of Metcourt. And whilst he, Urien, was on an expedition, he was murdered at the instance of Morcant, out of envy, because he possessed so much superiority over all the kings in military science. This tells us of the assassination of Urien by Morcant. Interestingly, the Historia Brittonum here corroborates the superior military reputation of Urien detailed in the poems of Taliesin. Theodoric was succeeded by his son, Frithwulf, who reigned for 6 years, and then Hussa, who reigned for 7. The latter fought against 4 kings, Urien, Rhyderfen, Rhydurch Hale of Strathclyde, Gwalawc, Gwalog of Elmet, and Morcant, Morcant Blwch, or Morgan, possibly also of Strathclyde. This list of kings seems to have been an alliance against the Angles of Bernicia. The alliance was at first successful, forcing the Angles out of Bamber Castle, Bebenberg Dingwadi or Dinguroi, and besieging them in Lindisfarne, Metcalfe or Innis Metcourt, in which case this may be the campaign in which Urien was killed by one of his allies, Morcant, possibly over who should be the leader of the alliance. In another poem, Taliesin's Plunder, the poet talks of Urien as chief of the army, which also seems to be an alliance, and again probably against the Angles, although the allies are not named in the same way. They may in fact be ancestors. The allies/ancestors on that occasion possibly named as Eginir, the kingdom of Nudhale, possibly around Selkirkshire, and Gwydden. A highly corrupt text possibly provides another poem, Reged Arise, but one in which the poet reminds the hearer and reader that he, the author, was not of you, meaning the people of Reged. It is also an unusual poem in that it criticises the wars of Urien against the Angles of Bernicia and other enemies. They groan facing sword blades and battle, men groan underneath their round shields, wailing like greedy white gulls in Mathry, a location which probably means a settlement on a plain and is unidentifiable. Such a criticism of Urien might suggest the poem was composed after Urien's death or after some overreaching calamity. Till Urien in his day took Aeron, probably Ayrshire in Scotland, there was no fight. It wasn't welcome till Urien opened a front with Powys. No ferocity drove the tribe of Gerowis, nor Hyfed, nor Gododin, unknown locations. In some of the battles Taliesin recounts, it appears as if he was present, although in other poems it is clear he waits for Urien's return from battle. He may even have fought in some battles himself. Here he tells us that I saw Gwydden carried off in his blood in Fflamddwyn. My lord was taken in defence of a fort. This Gwynedd is unknown, although perhaps another son of Urien, hence he was shaken, and the location was probably around the river Llefynet in Cumbria. The poet lists all manner of fights, but it seems Taliesin had had enough of war. The fight for the crowd at Argoed Ford Dumbarton, battle for Bruin's cells, possibly referring to the Roman fort of Bremenium near High Rochester, Northumbria, and perhaps synonymous with Breguin, the site of one of Arthur's battles. A battle long famed, battle in a wood, battle in an estuary. There was fighting with clamorous steel, battle at Luteuin, fighting at Pencoed, drawing wolves to gorge on cascading blood. Fierce men are brought to their knees. The Angles' clans are defeated, made bloody by steadfast Ulf at the ford. Several sources tell us of the incessant warfare of this period, although they do not list many actual battles. Taliesin does, however, and it appears as if he and the men of Reged were exhausted. Nonetheless, Urien may have had no option but to defend his realm. Taliesin tells us, from summer to winter, weapons in hand, he's kept watch at ford and rampart, sleeping, stretched out in trenches, till the end of the world. All accounts will agree. He sweeps aside enemies. He deserves the image, lightning destroyer. Taliesin now tells us that he may have fought, perhaps a sign of how desperate things had become, or that all able-bodied men were required to, or wanted to, serve. I roared, my breast full of tumult, lance on my shoulder, shield in my hand, when Godu and Reged were ranged for war. The poet, however, foresees what the price of such incessant war will be, which implies that Urien and the men of Reged had, by this time, met with defeat. I foresee war and what will be lost, how much I shall lose when that is lost. By this time it seems as if the poet has joined with, or been sent to, the unknown Hyfid. It is I who declared him my shelter in battle. With joy my lord distributed gifts. No leader can compare with Urien. This perhaps reiterates a change in fortunes for Reged after the death of Urien and Owain. It is now Ulf and Hyfid who defend Reged, perhaps unsuccessfully, but the poet perceives that the origins of all this woe lay with Urien's aggression, no matter how good a lord he may have been. Although in Reged Arise it seems as if the poet fought in person, despite telling us he was not from Reged, elsewhere, and probably earlier in the poem Taliesin's Plunder, he stresses that his contribution to Urien's war efforts lay in his poems rather than on the battlefield itself. My spear shaft of ash is my holy Owain, the joy of my face is my master's shield wall. Owain means inspiration, but was the personification of the inspiration of poets and bards, their muse. Here Taliesin tells that he would have loved to join his lord riding to battle. Later it seems he did. One kind of delight is the clashing of warriors, the delight of the fierce war cry. Again, the fact that the poet seems to have later actually been required to fight may suggest a change in fortunes, suggesting a time when every able-bodied man was required to fight. Another of Taliesin's poems to Urien is an apology for causing upset or offence, possibly in Reged Arise. Now in To Pacify Urien, the poet seeks to redress any offence caused, calling Urien the bravest leader and best chieftain, and stating that he, the poet, will not go northwards to be with those cowards. Taliesin may have been out of favour and looking at alternative employment or patronage. Does this predate the patronage of Hyfid? Taliesin points out that, for a joke, I poked fun at him, the old man, though I'd loved no one more. The poet has seen the error of his ways and realises that no one gives him more than Urien. In the Lament for Owain, who succeeded his father around 590 but died soon after, in approximately 595, Taliesin's praise of Owain is again militaristic in nature, his spear in fight like the wings of dawn, his grip hard, harvesting enemies. He had the martial spirit of his father and forebears. Owain cut a fine figure in bright-coloured battle dress. The poem "In the King of Heaven's Name They Remember," Taliesin's patronage seems to have shifted to Gwalog, although his reign apparently ended in circa 568, before that of Urien. Perhaps, therefore, Taliesin was at Gwalog's court before he was at Urien's, and then Owain's. Indeed, in the poem "In the King of Heaven's Name the hosts are keening," Gwalog is listed as an enemy of Urien, and we are told losing U's hard lord, maybe suggesting he had fallen. Urien may have defeated Gwalog, and Taliesin was transferred or taken to Urien's court. Another possibility is that the poet was at Urien's court before shifting his allegiance to Gwalog, and then shifting it back, reading the apology to pacify Urien as an apology for having shifted his allegiance, an error he lamented. Taliesin's praise of Gwalog is, however, highly military as well in nature, suggesting that it was a common thread for poetic praise of all contemporary leaders. Gwalog, too, is called a defender of his homeland, and his lances are daunting and bitter to kings against him. He was swift in his weapons. His battles are enumerated, even though we have little detail. He breaks the defence of Unhoch, unidentified, and Llwyfain, possibly a son of Brychan, king of Brycheiniog in mid-Wales, and battles at Moor Hedge, Aidin, Edinburgh, York, and Bretwyn, the Troon Peninsula in Ayrshire. We are told that "you're a better stockade than a pack of bears," and that his fight was more than York's men could endure. We are told of war with the Cymry seizing forts, war's armies shaking Aeron, Ayrshire in Scotland, war out of wanting the Highlands and Aeron, bringing sorrow to sons, war in the Boar Woods, spears all day, you disdained the enemy. Many more of his named opponents and the locations of the battles are undefined. War near Gwyddor against Mabon, no survivors to tell what went on. The war in Gwenstery, the same as Gwenistred, Wensleydale or Wintersdale. The Angles subdued by spearsmen among the army. War on the Snowmoor at dawn, skilful in battle, was Gwrangorn. He warred against Heredur. We are told that in Pen Coed are many daggers, a massacre of corpses, and a scattering of crows, suggesting a battle at the town in southern Wales, and that in Britain and Aidin he's known in Gaffran, Gowrie, Scotland, and all around Brechin, Scotland. The last contemporary poem, "In the King of Heaven's Name the hosts are keening," the military successes of Gwalog are again listed. We are told of victories over the armies of Run, Nud, and Nwithon, probably all rulers of the kingdom of Nudhael. We are told he was not a slave to his rage, and did not stumble in reckless pride, but was swift in battle's advance, and slow to retreat from battle. His battle vigour is nourished by mead, his splendour shines like the summer sun. Building on the range of places in which he was known in the previous poem, here he was known from Caer Glud, possibly the same as Altclud, Dumbarton, to Caer Caradog, possibly Caer Craddock in Shropshire, the border of Penpris, unknown, but it possibly means the edge of the forest. Several of the historical figures in the Taliesin poems were later absorbed into Arthurian myth, Taliesin himself becoming a companion and bard of Arthur and Bran the Blessed. In Arthurian legend, Urien became Urien of Gore, or Garlot, the brother of King Lot of Lothian, and who in some versions marries Morgan, or another half-sister of Arthur and Owain, became Owain or Owain, son of Urien, sometimes born of Morgan, a knight of the Round Table. Even Gwalog is one of Arthur's leading knights in some versions of the Arthurian story. Reading the contemporary poems of Taliesin gives us insights into the warfare and attitudes to war from the period, evidence we don't find articulated quite so dramatically anywhere else. Thanks once again, Murray, for writing that episode for us. If you'd like to have a go at writing an episode for us, or you want to contact us and give us an idea for a subject that you think we've not covered yet, then just drop us a line, info@thehistorynetwork.org for that. And once again, please do consider becoming a patron of the podcast at patreon.com/thehistorynetwork. Once again, thank you to all our patrons who make this podcast possible. Thanks again for listening. You've been listening to the historynetwork.org podcast, written by Murray Darm, read by Nick Barker.